Hello, everyone. This is It Tastes Different Gaming Podcast, a gaming podcast about all things gaming with three different flavors. I am one of your hosts, Nick Irwin. We also have another host, Patrick Smith.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And Shane Eisterhold.
How we doing, people?
All right, very good. All right, this is a gaming podcast, and we talk about pretty much everything in regards to gaming. Again, with three different flavors, that means we all have three different perspectives and different outlooks on gaming and things that we all like differently from one another. Of course, there are things that we like that are the same. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to talk about different gaming avenues, as well as we made top 10 or top 5 lists of our top 5 games of all time, as well as our top 5 disappointments or games that we disliked in our top 5 disliked games. So before we get to the top 5 games that we liked and disliked, I wanted to go around the room and see if we could find what do you think is on another person's top 5. So, Patrick, I'm going to send it over to you. What do you think are on both of our top 5 best of all games lists?
Well, on yours, Nick, I think you're big into the retro gaming. You do a lot of the old school retro gamings. I would be surprised if I didn't see like a Castlevania type game on your top 5 list. One of those series of games. And on Shane can never shut up about Final Fantasy. So I think that's going to be somewhat, one of the versions is going to be on his top 5. I bet we will see Final Fantasy there. One of them.
Yes, I believe you're probably right about that, at least on Shane's side of things. Shane, what do you think is on our top 5?
Well, Nick, yours definitely got to have a Mega Man, probably 3. Pat, definitely Barbie horse breeding, or some sort of MMO, maybe just a straight RPG. But I figure it's some sort of MMO. Can't really pick a name now.
Interesting choices. I think personally that on Patrick's list, I think on his top 5, Mass Effect is going to be on there. If it's not number 1, I'd be surprised, but I think it's at least in the top 5. And for Shane's, I do think I'm going to agree with Patrick and say that Final Fantasy VIII is at least on there somewhere in that top 5. Maybe not number 1, but definitely towards the top, I believe.
Oh, you
We're up for some upset.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
I'm married. I can deal with it.
So we'll see who goes. Let's see here. We're going to head and see who goes first here. Let's go ahead and do Patrick. Let's go ahead and start with you. And I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to start with your top 5 games, or would you like to start with your top 5 disliked or disappointed games?
Well, I'm going to start out on a happy note. I'm going to go with my top 5 favorite games. Okay. And I'll kind of start with number 5 and work my way through, just kind of discuss that. So number 5 is going to be Dragon Age Origins. That game sucked me in so many times. I cannot, I tried the game running my very first run through as a sword and board dwarf. And then I played again as a mage, and I played again as a different class. I played that game more times than I probably played most other games on my list. But it definitely was a great game back when it came back out on PC. I played a lot of Dragon Age Origins, and I still play it occasionally. I don't bring it out as much, just because I'm a little bit of a graphics snob, and it dates itself sometimes, even though it's only like 12 years old, or actually 10, 11 years old. So that was my number 5. My number 4 is going to be Knights of the Old Republic. And basically,
KOTOR.
Yeah, I loved KOTOR. That was another one that you could just play different ways. You play as a light side guy and get all these companions, and play as a dark side and get these companions. And I just love the way that the game basically change depending on your alignment. So if you were good, certain companions would be more aligned with you, and some would hate you, and vice versa if you were evil. Dark side versus light side type stuff. So that was pretty fun and kind of a cool, neat concept when they came out with it. And then it kind of built onto a little bit of the combat style that's pretty interesting, where it was a pause at the beginning of combat, so you can kind of build up your attacks and then unleash them when you unpause the game. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, I definitely like that about KOTOR. And also, for those who may have not beaten KOTOR, which you should have by now, the end where you get to pick, where you get to find out that you're the bad guy, basically.
Oh, God, spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah, that was.
If you haven't played it, it's an old game. Come on, it's on everything nowadays.
17 years old now. Come on. Yep. So that was like I said, that was my number 4. So there's already heavy hitters in my top 5. So number 3 for me is going to be the original Fallout on PC. That game was the one that I kind of first realized that games are not always for kids, because I remember playing that game thinking, wow, this is pretty brutal and pretty adult themed. Like what kind of games can you go out there and go marry a chick and then prostitute her out and then just do all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't normally do outside of like a Leisure Suit Larry type game or something,
That's how Grand Theft Auto came around.
Right. But, Fallout was just one of those very grungy and adult games that, the turn-based combat was pretty fun, and it was, by today's standard, it's still pretty good. I still love to load it up if I can get it to run on any machine, usually without that I have to run an emulator on. So Fallout's my number 3, the original one on PC. So number 2, this was a hard one because I was really tough to make a decision on between my 2 and 1. My number 2 game of all time is Horizon Zero Dawn. The story in that game was amazing. I've played that game multiple times, even though there's not a whole lot that changes, just because of the story. I played through it originally before the DLC came out, and then when the DLC came out, I played it again straight from the beginning because I wanted to experience it all together again. The combat got a little bit repetitive, but still it was just very interesting fighting mechanical dinosaurs and beasts with a tribal type person. It's like tribal type game with dinos that are mechanical, and there's a pretty interesting story about the fall and how it happened and everything. So the story for that game drove it home to me.
Yeah, it's a great game, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Not in my top, but definitely one of my favorite games.
Yep. So you kind of see a theme in my games. I'm very big on the RPG and action RPG type games like that. That type of stuff is what I love to play on there. And my number 1
story element.
Yes, the story drives me, because the gameplay can get repetitive in most just about any game, but if the story can drive you forward, you don't want it to end. And I felt that way about Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm like, oh, it's over already. I want to play some more, And even though, like I said, the combat got repetitive because it was always the same: find the weak spot of the mechanical beast and take it down, or something like that, and then do all the little open world stuff that most of these games are moving towards. My number 1. And Nick guessed it. It's Mass Effect. Making my list, I learned something about myself, that I love BioWare, I guess. I didn't realize how many games were on
right?
my
Most of your selections are from BioWare.
Yep. I mean, 3 of my top 5 are for BioWare, and then when we move on to the other list, there's some few more things on there, but BioWare seems to be pretty heavy. The original Mass Effect was amazing to me, that you can make choices that have an effect on the outcome of the game. Like, you can get people in your party killed that will not be in the next game, or you can get you can save people that will make an appearance in the next game, albeit they were a little bit cameos, but still, just to do a playthrough and have a character live or die and then play the next game in the series. And there's a cameo about because it ports your save that it would have been nice to see this person, but they died in whatever event that happened. So it was one of those games where it eventually made choice feel like it was real, and you got hooked on characters because you did side missions to progress them and make them feel more like part of the crew and not really just a party member you picked up at a bar or something, So yeah, right, Mass Effect. So yeah, BioWare made 3 out of the 5 of my top 5 games. So it made me realize I didn't realize that I was that heavily involved and loved BioWare games until I made the list, because I don't pay a whole lot of attention to who the developer is usually. I'm just like, oh, that looks like a cool game. I want to play that.
Awesome. That was a great list, and there's a lot of great games there. And I would agree with you on all of those. Those are all great games. The original Fallout I didn't play a ton of, but I have played it, and I do see how, at the time, how revolutionary that game would have been. And I have played it a bit nowadays, but it's a little old, and some of the mechanics are a little dated out of what I want to play in an RPG. But still, the choices and the dialogue and stuff is hilarious and great in Fallout, and especially the rest of them that you said. And I was thinking, we should wait on your dislikes, because I like how this is going. And I think we should come back to you on your dislikes, and we should head over to Shane with his top 5 greatest games of all time. And then we'll come back, and then we'll go do mine, and then we'll come back to our disappointments. So, Shane, go ahead with your top 5 greatest games.
Oh, goodness. All right. No crap. I'm a little bit older, so I started a little earlier. Number 5 is definitely Halo 1. Just so many memories on it. LAN parties, and the premiere for Halo 2 had a big tournament and got my butt kicked at the end, but it was still great. Just lots of memories of it. It really helped push shooters on consoles. It did it right. So that's where I would go with that. Number 5, definitely. 4, I got to throw Nintendo in here. Super Mario, the original. I got blisters on my thumb still today from that one. It was just stupid, silly, fun. Me and my brothers just played the heck out of it. 3, I'm going to go with Resident Evil 2. That was my favorite one out of the PS1 era, PS2 era, and probably PS3 era. I really enjoyed story, gameplay, all that. It just all clicked for me. And, except for Leon, he was kind of annoying. But other than that, I liked it a lot. Metal Gear Solid 1. God, that thing was so much fun back in the day. I played the hell out of it so many times just to keep unlocking things like the bandana and the stealth suit and all that stuff. It was just so much fun. And contrary to belief, Final Fantasy was not in my list. Just kidding. It was number 1. Final Fantasy VIII is my favorite.
I knew it.
Final Fantasy VIII is my favorite out of all the Final Fantasies so far. I just love the mini games to it. I love the card games. I love the story. Not all the characters were there, but overall, it was definitely one of my favorites. I still say it's better than 7, but that's just me. And I will throw in a bonus game. Last of Us Part 1, the original for PS3. That game was just such an amazing game. It was one of the few games that really just make you want to just play 24/7 just to find out what happens at the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember I didn't buy a PlayStation, the latest PlayStation when it came out. I bought an Xbox, but when I did buy my PlayStation, it came with like a greatest hits type game, and that was one of the games that were on there. And man, I played the mess out of that game. I loved it from start to finish. It was really good and really made me. By the time I picked it up, there were already rumors that the second one was coming out, so I was hyped. I'm like, I'm ready for the second one. The first one ended. This is gonna be great.
Yep. If you didn't cry in after that first 15 minutes, man, you're a heartless bastard. I sat there sobbing in front of my big screen.
And then, I agree on the Halo as well. I mean, Halo was my first introductory game back into consoles. I'd stayed out of consoles for a long time. And talking about having to learn a controller. I remember playing Halo with my friends and accidentally going, what button does this? And accidentally sticking grenading people. And they're like, why are you running away? You'll find out.
That's right.
They got a glowing stick bomb on their back.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the first games, far as an FPS that I played on a console, period. And that just got me hooked. And then they started making them more and more. Rainbow Six 3 was really close to being on my list because I played the hell out of it, and it was just such fun. Even the silly voice controls you could use, breach and clear, yelling at your TV in the middle of the night. That was just a blast.
Yeah, indeed it was. And Halo was the first first-person shooter for me that got me using inverted sticks for the up and down controls. Because ever since then, I would always, up is down, and in Halo, I couldn't play that way. I had to invert them for up is down and down is up. And then ever since then, it's the only way I can play first-person shooters or anything with a camera that you can move horizontally or vertically, I mean. So, yeah, definitely some great games. All right, so it's my turn to go through my top 5. You guys did get some of them on there. You didn't specify where they were positioned, but you did announce the ones that were on my list. So on my, I like a lot of old school retro games. So on my number 5 on my list is a game on the NES called Faxanadu. Faxanadu is a RPG, side-scrolling RPG. This game is just, I've played it numerous times and beaten it numerous times. It's a great kind of niche game. Not a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people played it or really even heard of it. I remember playing it as a kid and just loving it, and I own it today and still play it. And I beat it, I think, at the beginning of this year again. So it's a great game. It's just old side-scrolling RPG for the regular Nintendo, which was a great game. And then my number 4 is a Mega Man game. But unlike Shane, it's not Mega Man 3, it is Mega Man 2.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, one off. Mega Man 2 is my absolute favorite Mega Man, I think. I do love the Mega Man series in general, and I do love Mega Man X, the X series, and a lot of the numbered Mega Mans at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. But I think Mega Man 2 is my all-time favorite. It's the only one that I continually go back to and play. I do go back to all of them and play them all, but 2 is definitely the one I play the most. So, Mega Man 2, my number 4. Number 3, Castlevania, the original NES Castlevania, is my number 3. I do like pretty much all the Castlevanias. The PlayStation 2 Castlevanias are okay. The Nintendo 64 ones are all right. But the original Castlevania, out of all of the Castlevanias, that's probably the one I go back to and play the most. I love Castlevania, any Castlevania type of game, but I think the original Castlevania is my favorite and still is to this day. And that's something I still pick up and play through just when I want to. When I feel like I just want to play something, and I don't know what I want to play, that's typically what I'll load up and play. So, my number 2 is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is... What'd you say?
I wouldn't have guessed that.
No? I love Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is one of my favorite old school RPGs. I wish they would make another one. Or even like a full... I really wish they'd make a sequel, but even a full remake of Chrono Trigger would be awesome to see. I just love the RPG elements, the fighting, the story, the whole time traveling portion of Chrono Trigger, going back in time and forwards in time, and just everything about Chrono Trigger I just love, and I wish we would have seen more from that franchise. But they came out with Chrono Cross for the PS1, the PlayStation 1, which was pretty good, but it still wasn't Chrono Trigger. It still had that time traveling and various things like that. But in as much as I do like Chrono Cross, I think Chrono Trigger is my favorite. And then my number 1 is Final Fantasy 3 or 6. It was 3 when it came out in the US, but it's actually number 6 in the chronological order of Final Fantasies. It came out on Super Nintendo. Just one of the best stories, I think, of Final Fantasy there is out there. There's characters that you can not get if you don't go find them. There's some characters you can lose if you don't do certain things. I remember there's one character named Shadow, and you go on this floating island, and if you don't wait long enough, you'll lose him. And I did. I didn't wait long enough. I was too impatient. I was like, oh no, there's a timer counting down, and if you don't get off the island in a certain amount of time, then you lose, and you got to wait till the timer's like almost completely empty before he'll come, and then you can save him and have him for the rest of your game. And I didn't. I left and didn't have him for the rest of the game. And there's other characters that if you just don't go out and search for them, you won't get. And then, there's the opera scene, and halfway through the game, the entire game changes. From what you've been playing, it's completely different. The whole landscape's different, and everything's dark and decrepit, and it's great. So, and I play that one quite a bit. I always go back to Final Fantasy 3 and just pop it in and play it. So that is my top 5 games.
Well, I respect your decisions. You're not wrong on the Final Fantasy.
No, man. No.
Yeah. Not a disappointment there. I figured it'd be a lot of retro titles on your list. So
I think it was all retro titles on my list.
I was just thinking, I was like, he likes all these Konami and Square Enix games.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Capcom. You got Mega Man, Capcom.
Capcom.
And in fact, Xanadu, I think that was... Shoot, I don't even remember who that was back in the day. But that's my top 5. Yeah, definitely a lot of retro games. That's what I like the most. So now that we've gone through our top 5, now it's time to go through our top 5 dislikes / disappointments. These are ones that, some of these are ones that we disliked. And then some of these are maybe ones that we were just
completely
disappointed
loathe.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. That we completely loathe. We dislike, or we're just disappointed in something that we expected it to be, and it didn't turn out to be that way. So we'll go back around and back to Patrick to his top 5 disappointments.
All right, so this list was actually a lot harder to make than I thought it would be. I'm like, I dislike a lot of games, but it's not really, I guess it's hard to remember a game you dislike because I just didn't play it. I played a little bit, or I was like, oh, I didn't like what I saw, so I didn't play it. So my number 5 is actually going to be a cop-out. My number 5 dislike is going to be any board game that's turned into a console or PC game that is single player. That chaps my behind more than anything. Is when I pick up a game that has been a board game, which is a multiplayer thing for friends and family to gather to play, and then that game comes out, and you go to play it with your friends, and it's like, hey, this is a single player game. And you're like, what is this? How is that? Or it's only couch co-op between like one and two people.
As a reference to what he's saying, Pandemic. That was a bunch of horse crap on the
Yep. So I'll move on to number 4. So Shane actually picked the game that was on my dislike list. Majority of these are disappointed, not really dislikes. My number 4 disappointing game was Star Wars: The Old Republic, the PC MMO. I thought this game was going to be great. I'm like, it's an MMO. I get to play as Star Wars characters. It's WoW, but it was Star Wars. I downloaded it. I played it. It was great. Got to the end, and I'm like, there's nothing to do. There's no playing with friends like an MMO should be. All the in-game content was kind of, for lack of a better word, it was garbage. You didn't really have a lot to do unless you wanted to play Hut Ball or do something like that. I'm not sure if you guys played that game or not.
I did. I don't think I got to the end game, but I got pretty far up there. And yeah, it was, being an MMO, it was very set on playing by yourself, basically.
Yes, and so yeah, that was my biggest gripe with that. Like I said, it was a disappointment, not a dislike. I still played the game, and playing through each of the characters single player was good, but it was a huge disappointment to me because I wanted to play it with my friends and play Jedi and Sith with my friends, and that didn't happen. So that was my number 4. I will also mention that was a BioWare game, so I do like BioWare games, but I think that they usually are the ones that let me down the most at times because I have such high hopes for their games. My number 3, this one's probably going to get me in some trouble, but I really was disappointed in The Last of Us 2. The game was amazing for the first half. And then when they switch over and try to make you see the story from Abby's side, it really didn't fit well we already hated Abby. And I'm like, I cannot get behind Abby's character because I already dislike her so much from the events that built up to that. They're trying to make you see things from her point of view, which really didn't fit for me. It would have been a much better game if they reversed it. So if I started as Abby, so I can see what's going on through her eyes, and then maybe swapped over to play the other half, So I was a little disappointed. I was pretty much disappointed when I got to the halfway point when I swapped over. I'm like, well, the game could have ended here, and I would have been perfectly happy and loved the game. But then when they tried to force me to have feelings towards Abby, it really didn't help me any on that side. I was ready for it to be over.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Abby portion, it was the same for me. The Abby portion really just, I just wanted to get through her content, really. I didn't care anymore at that point. Through the first half as Ellie, I did care. And then once it changed over to Abby, exactly like you said, we hated Abby from the start. Once you figure out as the story progresses, you have a dislike for Abby, so you don't care about her trials and tribulations and the people she knows and all her stuff. You just don't care at that point. So,
yep. So like I said, yeah, that one was a huge disappointment to me. If we'd have reversed it, it probably would have went over much better with me, or if it would have ended at the part with Ellie, it would have been better. Number 2, unfortunately, is another BioWare game for me. This one might even be on Nick's list, but Anthem. That game came out. We watched that game for a year, or maybe even longer. We heard about it, and then it was radio silence for a long time, and then it came out. And we got closer and closer and more stuff. And I'm like, this game looks awesome. It's going to be a good little game to play with your friends. 4-player co-op, and we can run around in like suits and destroy stuff together. And it turned out, we played it. It was great until you reached the end of the game where you leveled up, and then there was just no end game content to keep you playing. So I don't know what some of these games think when they come out, if everybody is going to just be on board for PvP and more PvP. But, I like to play with my friends to do things like run missions or run task force or run dungeons or something. But Anthem, great gameplay in my opinion. I like playing it. I played it until I max leveled it, and then just nothing. There was no more to do. So the game fell flat in the end. So huge disappointment for me because it didn't even last a couple of weeks. We max leveled and then stopped playing.
Yeah, completely agree. I do think it was exactly what you said. It had that idea of being the ideas behind it were great, but the execution was just not there for that.
Yeah. And my number 1 disappointment game broke my heart. It killed me. And I'm going to have to say Mass Effect Andromeda, also another BioWare game. So I love their games, but they tend to disappoint me the most because I guess I have high hopes for their games. But they do a great presentation before the game comes out. You're like, this is awesome. And Mass Effect's my top number 1 love game. And then Andromeda was announced, and I'm like, oh, man, here we go. More of this, get to make decisions, and it affects the outcome of the game and your teams. And then, the game ended. I played it. I beat it. I played it to the end. I could not bring myself to play it again. But when I got to the end and they teased about the Quarians and all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh man, there's going to be more. So maybe they're not going to disappoint me. Maybe there is going to be some choices that had outcomes at the end, and then it just ended. In my opinion, it ended in a bad spot. It also let me down because the game was horrendous with choices and outcomes of your choices affecting your outcome. There was just none of that. It didn't feel like a BioWare game to me. It felt like it had a decent story, but it didn't have a BioWare sci-fi story to go along with it. So that was my huge disappointment. That game really hurt me because I went all out. I bought the big Max Deluxe Collector's Edition thing, so and I'm like, I'm gonna support these guys because that's my game, and it was bad. It was pretty bad. I was really disappointed in it. Yeah, that was that. And I do have one honorable mention, and this game is a game that I loathe. It's not a disappointment. It's not a dislike. It's a game I loathe. It's the only game that can get my blood boiling, and that is Golf with Friends. I will throw my controller at the TV with Golf with Friends. So that's the top 5 dislikes. Like I said, the majority of my top 5 is dislikes. 4 through 1 are dislikes, or disappointments, not dislikes. But my number 5 was a huge dislike, and then Golf with Friends is a game I loathe. So,
right, yeah, I would agree on Andromeda. Andromeda was definitely one that I was looking forward to too. Like you, it's not in my top 5, but I am a fan of Mass Effect, and I do like the Mass Effect series, and having it finally come back, and just being, I played it to the end as well, and there were some things I enjoyed about it, but there was a lot of things I didn't, and a lot of things that I wish were there that weren't. Like the original game had. I wish it would have just went back to that.
Yep. I felt like they tried to remake Mass Effect 1, but they failed at picking up all the good points of Mass Effect, such as the character development and the party and stuff like that.
Right. For sure. And all the bugs and stuff it had. It had a lot of technical issues.
It did. And I chomped through them because I got it right when it released.
All right. Well, that was a great list, Pat. And Shane, now it's your turn. What is your top 5 dislikes or disappointed games?
Well, first I want to say I want to defend BioWare. I don't blame them. I blame their publisher, who shall not be mentioned, because they're terrible people. But as far as my top goes, I'm going to catch hell for the first one. Number 5 is one of my bigger disappointments most recently, Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was a filler fest. I love the gameplay. I love the story. It's just there was so much filler. There was so much they should have done and could have done, but they didn't, in my opinion. So I was pretty damn disappointed in it.
Yeah. As someone who didn't play the previous ones, I don't know what to expect from the Final Fantasy, but I just recently played the remake, and I loved it, but there was a lot of filler in the game, but I still liked it, not being a fan of the Final Fantasy series like Shane is, but I definitely liked the game, and like I said, I just recently played it, and I was contemplating playing through it a second time. But yeah, there was a lot of filler, but definitely, in my opinion, a good game without having played most of the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah, and I my problem is they could have put so much of the original game, at least, on that track of the original game, into this first part. And they're milking this out as much as they possibly can to get as much as they can out of people. And it's dumb, because I'm going to end up buying the next one and it'll be the same way. But that's just my opinion. All right, number 4, I'll probably catch crap for this one too, but Metal Gear Solid 2. I was extremely disappointed watching Raiden's pixelated junk for 20 minutes sneaking across the oil derrick was just, it was like, come on. And then they made me play him for half the freaking game. And I cannot forget the Lila Lula Lay scene that just drove me nuts. The controls and the gameplay were still great, but it was the story on that one was just way too far, even Kojima far. But anyways, I'm gonna have to go with Pat on my third one, Last of Us Part 2. Couldn't agree more with that disappointment. I wish they would do a DLC where you could kind of flip the script and play as Abby first, and then go to the other part of the story, so you wouldn't have so much hate for her before you are forced to try to like her. It just made no sense. But that's just nuts, if you ask me. Final Fantasy X, I was very disappointed in, because the game itself was really good, but the voice acting was so atrocious it was hard not to just mute and just play the game on silence because the voice acting was so bad, and the laughing scene in the water, it was just I just wanted to punch somebody in the face for that one. And then next, and probably everybody will agree with this, Brute Force for the Xbox. It got so much hype. You know, it was Bungie. Bungie made Halo. It's going to be amazing. And guess what? It was crap. I took it back to the store like within 2 hours and begged GameStop, please give me my money. Please. They gave me $250. So that is my list. No, not $350. Only $250. I paid $60. Got $250.
Well, I guess I lucked out on that game. I never tried it.
Yeah. It was so bad. It was just terrible.
It was.
But that's my list.
And just to tie in to Brute Force. Brute Force was actually made by Digital Anvil, not by Bungie.
Or yeah, excuse me. They made God, what was that one before it? Not Halo. Damn it, can't remember who it was. What they made right before that one.
I mean, they were part of like the Freelancer group, weren't they? Didn't they make they were Microsoft Studios owned?
Yeah, Freelancer, and then
one or two of the Bungie guys were involved in it. That's what it was.
Oh, may have been.
I had to go look it up to make sure.
Yeah, they may have been a part of it for sure, but yeah, it was Digital Anvil that made that one. But yeah, that was a horrible game.
Yep.
To say the least.
Just terrible.
But I would disagree with most of your list. Last of Us 2, yes. Final Fantasy X. Voice acting was some of the voice acting was horrible, but
some.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I wanted to punch a baby in the face just to go to jail and avoid the voices. They were so bad. Waka's voice was the only one that was tolerable.
You know, Lulu made it all.
Well, Lulu had the big guns, and then Riku.
Yeah, and Riku.
But, yeah, the rest of them just terrible, just absolutely terrible. I mean, it was worse than the voice acting for Resident Evil on PS1, the original.
Oh man, those are classic. No, don't go.
Here, you take this, the master of lockpicking.
You're almost a Jill sandwich. The classics. Oh man, well, that was a good list. That was a good list.
It was the perfect list.
It was a great list. Yes, it was perfect.
Yeah, I got a feeling that we're gonna be like have no say in Nick's list because we're not gonna play like half of them or all of them.
That's probably true. No, there are at least two of them that you've played at least.
Well, I know Last of Us will be on there.
It's actually not. I did dislike Last of Us 2, but it's not in this list. So for my top 5 dislikes or disappointed items, my number 5 is Command & Conquer 4. I love Command & Conquer, one of my favorite franchises. As far as strategy games go. But I don't know what they were thinking with Command & Conquer 4. It was just completely different from all the Command & Conquers. I love Command & Conquer 3. I think Command & Conquer 3 is probably one of my favorites. And then we go into 4, and that's kind of when EA came in, and it wasn't a strategy game anymore. It was, but you weren't base building. You were basically had one command center where you just did everything out of, and it was just really weird. And I just, taking a franchise that I love and just destroying it basically is what they did with it.
That probably explains a lot why they haven't done anything much since. When they put out like 2 games since then. Alliances.
Well, they haven't put any out except for the remaster, which is fantastic.
Well, I thought
the remaster of Command & Conquer and Command & Conquer Red Alert.
Well, I think Tiberium Alliance came out and then Rivals after that.
Tiberium Alliance? I'm not.
You mean the Tiberian Wars?
No, that was the old one.
Was that the old one?
Yeah. I don't think they've come out with one since Command and Conquer 4.
I thought there was Tiberium Alliances, and then wasn't there Rivals? What was the Rivals one? What's that one? That one's the one that kind of reminded me of. It had the hexagonal shapes, almost kind of reminded me of. That one was on the mobile devices. That's why.
Oh, that was mobile. Yeah, I played that, and that wasn't very good. It was a mobile game. The mobile games in general, I typically dislike.
That's probably why. Yeah, they haven't done a full-fledged game since the one you're talking about, because Tiberium Alliances was also, I think, a browser-based game.
Yes, it was. You're correct, and it was basically a mobile game through and through. It was a browser-based game, and I did play it too a little bit, but it was. They could have just stuck it on a phone and said it was the same thing. So, it was very much a browser, like just click and let it do its thing type game. So, but yeah, ever since Command and Conquer 4, the only thing they've really brought out, which is a full-fledged Command and Conquer type game, was the remaster that they just did for Command and Conquer Rule 1 and Red Alert 1, which is fantastic. So hopefully they'll come out with, I'm hoping not more remasters. I'm hoping a brand new Command and Conquer that goes back to the originals, or another Generals, which was another great Command and Conquer. So that's my number 5. My number 4 is Fear 3. I love Fear, and I love Fear 1 and 2. Fear 3 was more of a disappointment than a game I disliked. Command and Conquer 4 was one I disliked. But Fear 3 was one that was just a disappointment. Fear 1 and 2 had a lot of, it was a first-person shooter, but it also had a lot of supernatural type things going on in it, and it was kind of spooky and scary. And Fear 3 just kind of threw all that spooky scariness out. It still had the supernatural type elements to it, but it wasn't spooky or scary, because the original Fear and Fear 2 were more a first-person shooter, but also kind of like a survival horror. It had a lot of horror and kind of ghosts and supernatural aspects to it, where Fear 3 kind of threw all that out for more of a first-person shooter type thing. Less survival horror, less supernatural, and more just shoot and kill. Kind of like the Resident Evil franchise kind of did as they moved along in their lines. Now in 7, of course, and the coming 8, they're kind of getting back into that, spooky scariness of it. But definitely, Fear was the same way. Once it got to 3, and that's where they ended it was 3. It just really went into more just shooting than anything else. My next one is number 3 is Castlevania Lords of Shadows 2. I love Lords of, like I said in my top 5, I love Castlevania. And I love Castlevania games. Castlevania Lords of Shadows 2 was just a disappointment. I loved Castlevania Lords of Shadows. I thought it was a fantastic game with a great story and great characters, and visuals and combat and everything. And Lords of Shadows 2 follows the same characters as the first one, but now they become Dracula in Lords of Shadows 2, and it's modern day instead of the old medieval, Black Plague days of Castlevania Lords of Shadow 1. So you have a lot of just streets and avenues and sidewalks and pavement and things like that. Unlike the first one where you had a bunch of outdoors, grassy areas and kind of like small villages and things. Now it's just cities and you're playing as Dracula basically. And so you have all these supernatural powers, which is great and all, but you're just fighting guys with guns and stuff. And in the first one you were fighting werewolves and the kind of the supernatural villains, and now you're just fighting people. And so, there were some supernatural things in it, but it was just a big jump from the first one. It was just like, I think they just took it in the wrong direction. It would have been fine if the main protagonist became Dracula and you played as someone else. But the fact that you play as him again as Dracula, it was like, that is not for me.
That sounds like something EA got a hold of and ruined.
Yeah. It was still made by Mercury Stream, which did great games back in the day. I don't think they've done anything since. or in a while. But I don't know what happened to that one. That one just seemed to lose focus. My number 2 actually matches up with Patrick's number 2, and that's Anthem. Again, Anthem, I think, had a good idea. It had a good, they kind of, I think they knew where they wanted to go with Anthem. It just wasn't executed well. It just didn't get there. There was a lot of bugs, a lot of issues, and Anthem just seemed like it was not ready for release yet. There's a lot of games that want to come out as a service where you just play it and it grows over time, and that's fine and all, but Anthem had way too many issues to become something like that, where a lot of features and a lot of functions of Anthem needed to be remade and revamped completely. It wasn't like they had the groundwork and they needed to build upon that, which is those live service games are like. This one was mainly, no, a lot of your stuff is broken. It needs to be completely reworked. And I think that's why now they've kind of gone in the direction where they're building Anthem 2.0. So we'll see how that turns out. Hopefully a lot better than the original.
Yeah, I guess it's good luck getting Nick to play Anthem 2.0, right?
I will play Anthem 2.0. And if it, I liked Anthem. That was one I was disappointed with. It wasn't one I disliked. It was one I was severely disappointed in because I really wanted it to be what I thought it was going to be. I thought the combat and the flying was awesome, and I liked that aspect of it, and the looting, but it just had a lot of things that just weren't fleshed out and needed to be.
See, I wouldn't have put it on my list just because what we did play was really enjoyable. They just didn't have an end game for it, and the game they did have was just too short. But what was there, I really enjoyed.
Right. It just ended too early. I really hope that Anthem 2.0 is BioWare's Final Fantasy 14. I want them to kill it with a meteorite and then come back with something much better.
Absolutely. Oh, I agree. Like, it's not, I don't have ill will towards the game. I really hope Anthem 2.0 comes back to be this juggernaut of a game, and it's just awesome that we can all play and have fun with. I really hope that ends up being the case.
Yep, agreed. Yep, I'm definitely. It was good drop in, drop out type multiplayer co-op game, and it just ended too quick for me. We got like 2 weeks out of it, and I think we actually played for another day or two. What was it, Shane? Maybe about 5 or 6 months ago, we picked it up again, and you and I played for like a day or half a day.
Oh yeah, and had a damn good time doing it. It was
the same thing over and over and over.
Exactly. Now, again, I put the blame on the publisher because they're notorious for pushing, and even if it's not ready, just get it out there. We'll fix it later. That's horse shit. That's my biggest problem with this last 2 generations is, well, we'll throw a patch on it. Stop it. Stop patching it. Just make it right the first time.
Right. I agree. But it's an unfortunate thing too that BioWare is not the BioWare we used to know. And a lot of these developers have kind of turned into that. Not what we grew up with. And it's unfortunate, but I guess it is what it is. So my number 1 is Metal Gear Solid, not 2, because I actually like 2 a lot, even though they had Raiden in there. But I ended up liking Raiden in the end, even though he was naked for the first half of it.
It's pronounced Raiden, by the way.
Raiden, whatever. Was actually Phantom Pain. And this was one I disliked. And the main reason is I love Metal Gear. So don't get me wrong about that. And I liked the Phantom Pain. I did. But there was more of it about it I disliked. I don't think Metal Gear should have gone open world. I like the story structure and the kind of linear structure of Metal Gear. That's what I loved about 1 and 2. They kind of had an open world type-ish. Not really open world, but they had big environments, and that was fine. Going through a big environment's fine, but I didn't like that this was just completely open world. I didn't like that aspect of it. I wish it would have been more linear and more just kind of stage structured and more story focused, really, than anything. Kind of like the other ones were. That's one of the things I love about, especially 4, which is one of my favorites.
I was about to say, if they would have kept more of that 4 route, that game would have been just sweet. Because I've played through 4 countless times. It was just that good.
Oh yeah, I love 4. And I love 1 and 2, and I love 4. And Snake Eater is good. I haven't played a ton of Snake Eater, so I'm not going to comment on whether I liked it or not. I have it. I just never played through it all the way.
Snake Eater is absolutely fantastic because out of all of the games, that one has the most searchable. I mean, just randomly go over here and just look at something. And it's like, oh my God, that's hilarious.
Right.
And
besides Snake Eater was kind of more open world too, from what I've seen, the little I've played from it and what I've seen from it. But it's more like, it's not necessarily open world. It's more like just larger environments, right? Yeah. And even if they wanted to go that way with Phantom Pain, that would have been fine. If they just went with the larger environment thing, I would have been fine with that. But it was just like, one thing I hated about the Phantom Pain 2 was you choose a mission and then you had to fly out to it, do it, and then you flew back. And just the downtime between flying back and forth between the rig. And I know you could do a couple of things while you're out there, but it was really, you had to go back and go out and, kind of to continue the story and various things like that. So it was really just like, especially the loading times, just waiting, flying on the helicopter and flying back and flying there. And it was just like, oh my goodness, is this ever going to stop? So I think that kind of hurt it too. And maybe that's the technology, we're going to have, faster load time supposedly with these new consoles coming out. So maybe that, maybe the Phantom Pain would load quicker. Maybe that would be better. But I think it was just that and just the open world aspect. I kind of like the kind of linear story driven.
Well, I would definitely agree with that because it's just not meant that way for that type of game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of these story-driven games lose a lot of themselves when they go open world because we're used to them giving us a story and us immersing in the story, and the action stuff almost takes a sideline, but not wholly. But whenever you do like an open world, you're like, hey, go here, and you can the story has to be fluid enough to incorporate you doing things out of turn or out of order than what the initial storyline or panel board would have been. So I feel that they lose themselves a lot when they do stuff like that.
Absolutely. There's not too many games that can pull off large open world with a heavy story element. Look at Grand Theft Auto 5. It was probably the only wide open world story driven game this last generation last 2 generations that was able to pull off such a massive story that made you want to play the story, made you want to do all the side crap, made you want to do everything. I mean, it was almost a perfect game.
Yeah, Rockstar has definitely got they have the mantra down, right? They have it down to where you can create an open world environment and have a story. And they have that aspect of it down. Even with Red Dead Redemption and even with Red Dead Redemption 2, which I didn't like as much as Red Dead Redemption 1, but everything you did, I think one of the things that Rockstar has compared to even Metal Gear Phantom Pain is like every little side, in a lot of these open world games, is that like every little side mission correlates to the main story, right? There's something that involves the main story in these side stories. And I think even Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto and everything like that, Rockstar's got it when it comes to that. They make sure that a side quest somehow incorporates itself into the main theme and the main story.
Right.
Even if it's a side quest,
Yep. Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, I like the original one better than the second one. The second one was much prettier, obviously, since it's newer, but I couldn't tell you what the story was for the most part for Red Dead Redemption 2. I remember playing it, going from one thing to the next. By the time I got to the third little camp area, I was already over with the do this, go to this new area, build it up, then have to move on for some reason, rinse, repeat, just keep doing that. It had gotten old for me, but for the most part, Rockstar does do great. That one was no exception. There was some really funny side missions and stuff. I think I remember most of the side quests more than I remember the main storyline of that game, though. Unfortunately,
I would agree with you there. I mean, I think a lot of the side quests in Red Dead Redemption 2 were better than the main story quests. A lot of them were.
There was too much taking away from the story on that one, in my opinion. I think you were forced to do some side stuff, and then you kept just going at it, and then the main story just dwindled away. By the time you got back into it, it didn't really matter because you had done 1,000 of the things.
Yeah, with Red Dead Redemption 2, I beat it, and I mean, one of the main things about Red Dead Redemption 2 is it as far as the story goes, is it didn't get me as much as the first one did, right? I wanted to know what happened. In Red Dead Redemption 2, I really didn't care. I kind of knew what was going to happen. It was kind of really easy to figure out what was going to come down the line. And what I imagined was going to happen is exactly what happened, right? It was kind of easy to figure out. So it didn't have a lot of mystery to it. And it kind of tried to recycle itself as the story-wise as the first one. And I think that's also where it... But and again, I think what hurt Red Dead Redemption 2 was it was a prequel to the first one, right? And so you kind of know where... And I think that's where you kind of know what's going to happen. Is because if you beat Red Dead Redemption 1 to the finish, and you kind of learn about the gang and everything like that, playing the second one, which is a prequel to the first, you kind of start to figure out how the route's going to go, right? Because they have to match it up to the second or to the original. I think if it was more of a sequel, that would have probably been better. But oh well.
Yep. I look forward to see what Rockstar does next. I mean, they do good games, and I have a tendency to play most of what they put out.
Right. Well, what they're doing next is putting out Resident Evil Grand Theft Auto 5 on the PlayStation.
I want something new. Let's say that I want something new.
God, that game's gonna live forever.
Coming out on the PlayStation 5 and leaps through.
Yeah. Eventually, they're gonna get it on the kids' Amazon tablet. Now it's coming out.
The kids go Amazon Fire.
Yeah.
You can now play it on your smartwatch.
Yeah. That game will be around forever. It'll be like Back to the Future. We have 6 TVs on, and you see a commercial for Grand Theft Auto 5 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, on your Fitbit. It's an exercise. You run from the police.
Yeah.
You want to go running?
And when you're beating a prostitute, you just shake your arm real fast.
Yeah.
Just throw on your 3D headset and go out in the yard and play Grand Theft Auto 5.
You take your headset off, and the police are really there.
Yeah.
That bus is really coming at you.
There is a dead
felt like I got hit by ground. Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mom, I wasn't here.
But yep, I'm a big fan of story-driven games. But those games that just try to do open world, I feel the same way you do. You get lost in stuff. Very few of them can pull it off and keep the story in line. You know, I think one of my favorite open world games is probably the Far Cry Primal. That game was hilarious.
Primal was great.
It was hilarious, and it was open world, and it didn't feel too much like an open world. It wasn't one of those ones where I felt like I was just going around doing the same thing, rinse, repeat over and over. It actually felt pretty good, and the whole thing with what was his name, Riki or whatever the dude. Yeah, he was like, I want you to try out my new rock armor, and I need you to hit me or charge this, throw this elephant at me or whatever. And it's just the whole thing is just great from start to finish to that whole series. That was a good open world one. But then people do it, other companies do it, and it just falls flat. It just feels like it's repetitive. You get your abilities in the first 4 or 5 missions, and then it's same thing over and over and over.
Right.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. I agree. I haven't played Primal. I have it. I just haven't played it. So one of these days I'll get down to playing it. I haven't played a lot of the Far Cries, except for 5 since Far Cry 2. I beat 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then I never played 3, which a lot of people liked. And I never played 4. And I never played Primal. And then I played 5, which I liked 5.
We did play 4, Nick.
Really?
One night. Yep. We played it on PlayStation with Steve. It was like a trial thing. We got to play 2 hours and we're like, yay. Then we wrecked or something. And
I must have.
we gave up.
I must have forgot about that.
Yeah, most people didn't like it.
I mean, they do make good games. I mean, Far Cry, the latest one, the Far Cry 5, and then the New Dawn. I mean, I liked them. I played them. I think we played those together, didn't we? We played New Dawn together, I think, didn't we? And 5.
No, I never played New Dawn.
Me and Nick played 5, and I think you guys played 5 as well.
I think you and Russ played New Dawn.
Yeah, because that was the what happens after 5 type thing.
Right, because that was a 2-player co-op. Well, I think 5 was 2-player co-op as well. So.
Yeah.
But the new one looks really good. The
5 was the
Far Cry
one where we
6 looks
saved
really
the
good.
Testy Festy.
Yeah, the Testy Festy was probably one of the more funniest side questions you can do.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
But
and 6 looks good.
Yeah, 6 was good. 6 was good, and so hopefully it'll be good. But it does look good. Okay, well, that was our top 5 and top 5 great games of all times, and our top 5 dislikes games. And you can see the different aspects of each person. You know, I'm the more retro oriented one, and then Patrick's more RPG oriented one, and Shane's more
all over the damn place.
All over the place. Yeah, I'm surprised Pong wasn't on there.
That was going to be a bonus.
No, I would have. You know, if we were going back to the Atari, I would have picked Pitfall, because Pitfall was a great Atari game.